Iowa's News Now Sports brings you black and gold glory. Your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
Welcome to our live pre-Purdue edition of Eye on the Hawks. Mitch Fick here with Owen Sebring and Mike Howell, and we start, as we have now a couple times with these, which is exciting if you're in Newsies, with some breaking news, some developing news from the NCAA, who announced that they are going to re-examine sports wagering reinstatement guidelines. Obviously, some pretty big news if you are Noah Shannon and wondering if that season-long suspension maybe changes somehow as we get through this. So I'll give you the Reader's Digest edition on this. We've got a full article up at iowasnewsnow.com if you want to look at the full release. I'm kind of going through the release from the NCAA today. Basically, they're going to go over this review the next couple of weeks, finish up by mid-October. There will be a final vote on updated guidelines at the end of October. The guidelines potentially could be applied retroactively. Here are the concepts they are considering. A first offense on basically a wager at their school, but not on their own team or any sort of wager. It would be, basically you would not be suspended for a first offense. You would, regardless of how much is wagered, you'd go through the compliance program, things like that. A second offense, depending on how much you wager, a suspension could be in play, but not set in stone. A third one, you could be suspended and it could go up to a full season of eligibility. So basically one strike is kind of dusted off. Mm-hmm. Obviously Noah Shannon's situation was a first strike. Bet on a UI athletic event that wasn't football. Betting on your own team is still permanent loss of eligibility. What are your initial thoughts of this? We were talking about this a few days ago. The NFL just recently shortened some suspensions for sports wagering, obviously different at the pro level than is the collegiate level. And some of those suspensions were cut from like 6 games to 4 games, things like that. We were just talking about, would that maybe happen in the NCAA? I think, if I recall, I was a little skeptical that it would. I've completely done a 180. I think Noah Shannon plays at some point this year.
Yeah, the NCAA is in the business of, well, it's true because I said so. And that seems to be, if this indeed gets approved, then I mean, it'll be interesting to hear from Kirk about if Noah Shannon comes back or not, because what would you say is your confidence level percentage-wise that Noah plays this season?
I say 100% in some capacity.
Wow!
We were talking about this earlier.
I just think, and I did reach out to Matt Weitzel, the SID for football. No statement from Ferentz right now. He did say we are welcome to ask about that after Saturday's game. So I won't be there, so please go ahead and ask about that if nobody else does. I would have to think, and we talked about this angle too, I don't know what Noah's current training regiment is. Obviously, he's a student assistant listed like that now in the program. He's still with the team. So I don't know what it would take to get up to game level. I don't know if he's certainly not practicing because he's not able to. Yeah. I would have to think, though, if
he's in the weight room right now.
He's doing something. He's getting ready for whatever the next step is.
Yes.
I would have to think, even if it's only 3 or 4 games, again, we'll get a vote at the end of October, so you'd think he'd be ready or could possibly be eligible if they make a decision on this retroactively by November, and you got the 4 games there plus a potential bowl game, maybe even a trip to Indy. You'd rather have him it'd be a shortened season, and still there's some damage done there, but I would have to think if they say he's eligible, there's no way in heck Noah Shannon's not suiting up one more time.
That Kinnick Stadium crowd would absolutely go bonkers.
For a Noah Shannon sack?
No.
For Noah Shannon being on the field.
Yeah,
imagine
they're going to lose it for him.
Now, the NCAA gets a lot of, crap, and rightfully so, all the time about their rules and stuff. But if they do go through with this and change the rules, I think you got to give them kudos that they said, because I think we all thought these don't make sense, especially for like what Noah supposedly did, bet on a different team, a different Hawkeye team. So if these rules do get applied and it's retroactive, so my fear when I first started reading, I was like, oh, this is going to be for future offenses, but it's pretty cool that they'll do it retroactively.
And I again, you guys might have to remind me, or you've looked back, because I can't remember, as much as we went through all of the gambling stuff, a couple months ago, at Iowa State, who would this impact? Who would potentially come back to the team? Would Jirel Brock be back?
I can't remember exactly off the top of my head who bet on Cyclone football himself. Right. Hunter Decker's bet on a game that he was a backup in, correct?
Was it the Cyhawk game even?
I think it was the Oklahoma State game in 21.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, that's just off the top of my head, but I feel like that's in the ballpark.
I know there's, Deshaun Hanukkah was in the news this week. I forget again what he gambled on, but there could be some Cyclones even come back to the roster.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack certainly, but that's a ray of light in a time where we thought the door was completely closed. There is now a crack in the door, and we'll see what happens there in the next few weeks. But boy, what a story that would be, and we'll see what happens. I just made a bold proclamation. I don't think it's that bold. I mean, if he's got eligibility, you don't think Noah Shannon's going to want to be running out the tunnel with his boys again? That'd be so cool to see.
Like you said earlier, like if they're not going to do this, I don't think they send out a press release.
Yeah,
there's got to be like
it feels like, this is you don't bring it up unless you're leaning that way.
You almost think that he'd be like possibly put in as a team captain even. I mean, I feel like he's like so well respected in that locker room, like that he could be walking out there at midfield.
Speaking of team captains, this is an interesting question, kind of off topic and off our rundown, but I was going to mention it on Sunday, but we never got to it. Now that we have 2 of the 5 captains are out for the season, essentially, and they're going to stay captains because they're leaders, it's kind of a unique position, and, there's still going to be leaders in that locker room, but, I don't think it's bad either way. It's just, I wonder if that ever happened in a college football team.
It's a very strange situation. I know Logan Lee was then voted in as that 5th captain after Luke went down. We haven't really seen that for Cade yet, and I haven't heard Logan's name since I think that first week maybe.
I thought he was last week.
Yeah,
I just didn't hear it at the presser, but I assume going forward, Logan's a captain as well. Again, you mentioned those 2 captains that are out. One, of course, Luke Lachey. Cade McNamara made official. Eyes didn't lie. Out for the year with an ACL injury. That means the Deacon Hill era begins. We talked about this a little bit on Sunday. Eyeball test, aside from some drops on Saturday against Michigan State, Deacon Hill, for a kid who hasn't played a lot of football since really his shortened senior year of high school, looked pretty solid.
Yeah.
I don't have any complaints. I think we've got the ups and downs VO that I cut. That's how I labeled it, was Deacon's ups, Deacon's downs. Of course, 11 of 27, 5 drops, a touchdown and a pick, but did fairly well. If we want to run that VO, if we have it available, Mike. If not, no big deal.
I was going to do the soundbite first.
Soundbite? Okay, we'll do soundbite first. Well, here's Deacon. This is the one that I posted up there. Okay, I just want to give the context. So I just asked him about the time he got with the ones, obviously in the spring. Gets all that time as Cade's still recovering, then fills in half the fall after Cade hurt his quad. So he talks about that, and then he's basically in Iowa City because of Coach Budmayr, who was the guy who recruited him to Wisconsin. He talks about loyalty in this and the relationship they've had for a long time. So here's your new QB1 on the time he's gotten with the ones and the times that have brought him to Iowa City to now be the leader of the Hawkeye offense. How much does that help that you had that many reps with the ones going back to the spring? You've got as much time as Cade probably did with the ones at some point.
Yeah, I think it helps a lot, obviously. Getting reps with Logan under center, and obviously throwing in Nico, Vines, Seth, all the guys like that. So I think it really builds chemistry. But yeah, I think the best thing was just being able to build that, and then now we got to continue it down the road.
How'd that relationship start with Coach Bud?
Yeah, so my sophomore year, he came out to recruit me. Honestly, I started working out with Coach Fisher throughout a win in LA, and then he contacted Coach Bud. And we kind of started 2019, so I've known Bud since 2019. He offered me before I was a starter in high school. And so loyalty is big for me, and, I was very loyal to him. I wanted to play for him. And so he was my first offer. I decided I wanted to go there after one visit. I committed to Wisconsin before I was a starter in high school as well. And so he obviously having that belief from him and me was the biggest thing in the world to me. And so having him here is night and day, blessing.
I imagine you were surprised then to get an offer when you were QB2 in high school. I mean, what was that moment like getting that?
Yeah, I mean, that was surreal. I played enough that season to have good film, and then it was kind of just like proving myself at camps, being able to do it anywhere. But I guess he saw something in me when I was young. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Wouldn't trade our relationship for the world. We're very tight. He knows everything about me and my family.
I remember in January when he committed, obviously there was still the aura around Cade because that was still maybe a month into that when Deacon came in. That there was at least maybe a little eyebrow. It was like, oh, the kid from Wisconsin's coming in, and it kind of came out that he had that relationship with Coach Bud and everything. And I know I've seen some people post about like, and he was going to go to Fordham. He had been committed to Fordham before this Iowa opportunity came in as a transfer. A kid who loses his senior season, most of his senior season to the pandemic, who had been committed to Wisconsin for a long time. You feel like even just, again, eyeball test, and you saw the interception there, and you'll see some of the better throws, nice slant there to Seth Anderson on Saturday, that maybe he ended up flying a little under the radar. He was a 4-star recruit, but he committed so early, stayed committed, was obviously far back on the depth chart at Wisconsin just because he's a younger kid that, people were wondering why didn't he have any other FBS opportunities when he got into the transfer portal. I don't think anybody really knew about him just because he'd been committed. So I can't, and maybe I'm just creating a narrative in my head, but it feels like, man, that maybe there's some diamond in the rough type thing of just like nobody was looking at him because he'd committed so long and then didn't have a lot of film from the last couple of years, and here he is now QB1. And again, eyeball test against Michigan State for a kid that came in cold. There were some throws that made you go, all right.
Yeah, you certainly hope so. That really surprised me when he said that he didn't have any other, not even just Power 5 offers, he didn't have any other FBF offers. I mean, that was like, Fordham was your best opportunity? Come on. But this Saturday is really going to be an interesting opportunity for him to really show what he's worth, because I think everybody was giving him a little bit of grace on Saturday, just knowing like he wasn't, I'm sure he was prepared as you can be as the backup quarterback, but still everybody was planning for Cade to play that whole game. So he's coming in as a sub and, did his job as a backup quarterback. But now it's his team for the rest of the season. So what can he do with it? And there was another, I'll leave him nameless, media member today who still has his doubts about Deacon Hill. He believes he has kind of a limited skill set and that Purdue's defense is going to exploit that. And that he was predicting a big Purdue win, honestly, on Saturday. So who knows? I fully and freely admit that I don't know the X's and O's of football like super well. I'm good at knowing like stats and numbers and putting together a VOSOT. But like when it comes to like analyzing a quarterback's mechanics and stuff, that is not my skill set. So maybe that's going to be the case, and Deacon is going to really get his world rocked. But like from what I saw on Saturday against Michigan State, I'm like, dude, this guy can play. He can be a good to potentially very good Big Ten West quarterback.
You mentioned mechanics, and it was funny. Steppy did a really nice write-up on just his background. He was a water polo player from way back when, like learned to swim when he was 2 years old. And he talked about in the early days before he went all in on football and kind of left water polo in the back, that his coaches would, I guess when you are throwing a water polo ball or whatever I don't know a whole lot about water polo.
It is a ball.
A ball. It's a spheroid. That there's a lot of wrist action in the throw, and that he had to lose that through football, and that his coaches would get on because he was still throwing a football, like launching the wrist like that. That's a meme right there, just me launching with my wrist right there. Again, just like eyeball test, there's zip on his passes. Whether or not that's a massive factor in catching passes is up for debate, I think, kind of situation by situation. But you look at him, and maybe I'm just viewing through the filter of Nate Stanley and Nathan Chandler going back 20 years, but big dudes with big arms at Iowa have tended to do pretty darn well, particularly Stanley, a 3-year starter who wins 27 games and is number 2 on basically every all-time passing list at Iowa behind Chuck Long. So maybe I'm putting through that filter and viewing through Stanley-colored glasses or something like that. But, Mike, what do you think? I mean, I saw enough that we talked about this a little bit on Sunday, too, of just like, do you change the expectation for Iowa? The goals remain the same, obviously. You're only going to your 6th game, but did you see enough from Deacon on Saturday where you're thinking, okay, like everything's still ahead for Iowa?
Yeah, I saw a mixed bag, I think. I think there were definitely plays that impressed me coming in cold.
Sure.
After not playing, a lot of college football. He played almost in every game this year, but late in the fourth quarter when the game's been in the bag. There are some times where you look at it and the interception, obviously, and then there was another one that probably could have been picked that was into double coverage the second half, I believe. So the Iowa coaching staff's definitely going to say, hey, limit those throws right there. But I kind of like the mentality of the gunslinger. I know Purdue's defense has a lot of sacks. Mitch told me about that this morning. They like 5th in the country, I think, or is it 14th in the country? They have like
16 sacks and 5. Yeah, they're in the top 10 in the country for sacks, I think.
And Iowa's
per game.
Passing offense is usually a little deeper routes. So I think, is that going to be a play this season or this game where Purdue's going to kind of get to the quarterback if Deacon doesn't get the ball out? But that's where that short passing game we've been talking about a few weeks can really come into play, I think, this year. But I think he has all the tools. Still not a lot of sample size, though, so we'll see in a few weeks.
Small samples so far, at least enough where you don't think the season's in the tank for sure, and too early to even say that regardless. Obviously, we'll look back again at a big day for the Iowa defense against Michigan State. 4 turnovers, 3 picks, and a forced fumble recovery from Ethan Hurkett. Not everyone, started to paint with a broad brush. There was a lot of talk about where are the turnovers for an Iowa defense that always has turnovers. And talked a little bit about in the preview last week heading into the matchup with the Spartans that this is an offense that attacks a little more, maybe presents a few more opportunities for potential turnovers. So I asked Jay Higgins about the give and take between what a defense is prepared to do against what an offense is somewhat offering up to that defense to maybe happen. And as he pointed out, getting turnovers is not exactly a play call sometimes.
I know there was talk about, why there weren't interceptions and stuff too. How much of that is what that offense is doing to present opportunities? I mean, it's kind of give and take.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we didn't do anything different that we've done the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks this past game. And we got interceptions and turnovers. And, that's not a play call. So it's like I don't want you guys thinking like, okay, this week they were like, we're focused on getting the ball back. It just doesn't happen like that. We kept doing what we've been doing, and the ball ended up in our hands.
It's like the quintessential break the rock mentality. Just keep being in the right spot, keep pursuing the way you're supposed to. Mike seems to think there is a play that you just
they need
an interception.
Run the interception, guys. Run it every play.
The dam was going to break. It felt like sooner or later. I mean, it's Iowa's defense. They were going to get some, and I think maybe as we get into our look at Purdue here in a little bit, maybe another opportunity. Hudson Card's not a guy that turns the ball over a lot, but he likes to go downfield, and maybe an opportunity again as Jamari Harris keeps coming back. He got his first pick of the season. That was great to see. Of course, Cooper got one. Sebastian Castro got his second one. Maybe some more opportunities for those ball hawks to do what they are meant to do.
Mike's our resident sickos expert. Is this sickos potential on Saturday?
I haven't looked at their account. I don't think so. I think, well, it could be. I mean, their offensive rankings, looking at a broad brush, it doesn't tell the whole story. Iowa's obviously all in the hundreds. Purdue, you think traditionally they have a good offense, so they got a new, defensive-minded guy. I believe was he the DC under Brett Bielema last year? Warren Walters.
Yep.
So their offense is ranked in the 70th in all the categories. It could be a sickos game for sure.
I just see. I feel like this has the potential for being a lot of turnovers again. Like there were 5 combined on Saturday against Michigan State.
5 or 6,
I think.
Ironically enough,
6. There were 6 turnovers.
6.
LeSean had his.
The 3 picks and the fumble recovery, and then
more coincidental. But I was looking at just see how much they turn the ball over and some stats. But Iowa and Purdue have the same exact turnover margin. It's like minus 0.4 turnovers a game. So, yeah, that ranks 94th in the country.
Not great.
Well, let's take a closer look at Purdue. We just talked about that defense, 16 sacks in 5 games, including 6 in that big win last Saturday against the Illini. Hudson Card, though, has been a really nice addition as well, as you see those defensive stats for the Boilermakers coming in at 2 and 3. A tough schedule. We talked about on Sunday as well. That opening loss to Fresno State. Fresno State's 5-0 and ranked in the top 25 now. Syracuse is 4-1. Their only loss came last week against Clemson. That's a pretty tough group they have gone up against. Had that win on the road against Virginia Tech won that game, correct? Beat Virginia Tech
no, they beat Virginia Tech and sort of record. Virginia Tech's one of the bottom Power 5 teams this year.
And then coming off that big win again against Illinois. Hudson Card, second in the Big Ten in passing yards. The transfer out of Texas, of course, got thrown in against Alabama last year after Quinn Ewers went down for the Longhorns. So he's got plenty of big game experience. Again, doesn't have a propensity of turning the ball over through a couple picks in the loss to Wisconsin a couple weeks ago. But you see there completing 64% of his passes, 5 touchdowns, and those 3 picks. And then a very familiar face to Hawkeye fans for the second time since he transferred. The first time he's made it back to Kinnick in a different shade of black and gold. Tyrone Tracy, 288 rushing yards for the Boilermakers this season, including 196 just in the last 2 games, 5 touchdowns. Of course, he was a great wideout for Iowa for a spot of time there, especially in 2019. Nate Stanley's senior year, you had Tristan Wirfs and Tyler Linderbaum on that offensive line. Amir Smith-Marset was a great wide receiver, Brandon Smith, and Tyrone Tracy was huge there during his time in Iowa City. 964 all-purpose yards, was way more of a receiver than he was a running back. 7 touchdowns, was really a big play guy for the Hawkeyes. Had long touchdowns against Northwestern and Wisconsin in 2019. I believe it was second in yards, in receiving yards for the Hawkeyes during that 19 campaign. I think was third or fourth in receptions, but a face that this Hawkeye defense knows very well going up against him in practice. There you see him with the reverse in the Holiday Bowl, flashing some running back skills there. Zach Hanley just did a beautiful job filming in these games way back when. Maybe a chance to talk to him next week as we get ready for the Badgers. But Jamari Harris remembers going up against Tyrone in practice, lining up across from him as DB. And, well, Jay Higgins has a lot of history with the Tracy family going back to their days in Indianapolis, so they are looking to see a familiar face and prepping for a new opportunity to go up against him again come Saturday.
Did you cover Tyrone at all while he was here, Tyrone Tracy?
Me and Tyrone had a decent amount of battles. So,
Yeah, what do you remember about him as a player?
It's a very shifty, and he's strong as well. He has a good center of gravity. But overall, just a great player and playmaker, and I believe he's doing that over there in Purdue as well.
I know his family, a guy I grew up with. Just excited to play against him. We did it last year, so it's just another game.
But this is different because he's going to be playing a lot. He's playing a lot, and he's playing running backs exclusively now.
Yeah, definitely. They got him a big piece of the offense they have, and we're gonna game plan for him like we would any other running back in the Big Ten.
When did you first meet him?
I played AAU basketball with his younger brother probably since kindergarten, and then obviously that's when we met. So me, Deontay, and the Tracy family, we know each other pretty well.
You stay in touch regularly still? In season a little different?
Yeah, in season a little different.
You block all those numbers in season for sure. And Tyrone, just part of what is always a very dangerous Boilermaker set of weapons. Devin Mockabee, who, if memory serves, had a pretty nice game against Iowa when Purdue upset the Hawkeyes right after that Penn State win in 2021 at Kinnick Stadium. I believe that was kind of Maccabee's big game. Man, they've always got some bruising running back, and he was no different. Deion Burks is their leading receiver. Abdur Rahman Yassin has really done a lot of good stuff for them as well. TJ Sheffield, who had a nice game in 21 against them as well, he's back as a senior. Mockabee also works out of the receiving corps as well. But Deion Burks, boy, DB, David Bell, I mean, everyone's gonna be shaking again about that. That's just classic Purdue. They're gonna have weapons outside. They're gonna be able to pound it inside as well with the running game. And again, a kid like Hudson Card, who I've been high on since the beginning of the year. I think I picked Purdue third in the West. I think maybe just based on Hudson Card, or maybe it was fourth. I just a kid that you knew was going to come in and bring some stability in the midst of a coaching change and regime change. But it's Purdue. They're, as much as Iowa fans maybe want to act like they're not one of the true rivals to Iowa, not the Minnesota or the Wisconsin or the Nebraska. Boy, every time they match up, it's a fun one.
Yep,
Mike, I don't know what you think about that. Do you consider Purdue to be a rival to Iowa?
You know, we were joking about it yesterday when they went to Legends and Leaders, and they had one protected
that was
rival.
The protected rivalry.
Yeah,
people rolled their eyes.
Iowa and Purdue was because it wasn't going to be Wisconsin. They were in the
I don't even remember what Legends and Leaders were split up as. It's still on NCAA 14, and I ignore it every time.
Yeah, but there was some joking going along when that happened, and looking back at and then looking at those rankings where they played like 90-something times, the most outside of Minnesota and Wisconsin. It is one of those games every year, though. As a Hawkeye fan, I'm like, I don't like seeing them on the schedule. I think we play them every year, but I'm like, they always win games they shouldn't, or they're high scoring. Remember that one in West Lafayette like 7 years ago? It was like 44, 43. And
it's a little Northwestern-y.
Yeah.
Like they were
you never know what you're going to get.
2007, 2008, 2000, where it's just like, man, like they're always there, and they're always a thorn in your side.
And I don't know, since the coaching staff changed, but it always seems, at least when I was on defense, they played the same defense, and they let offenses get, underneath stuff, try not to give up the bomb. But Purdue just would always 7 yards a pop, just take that stuff, and they usually have an accurate quarterback. Hudson Card, I believe, is pretty accurate, 64%. So it'll be interesting to see if, that front four can get pressure on him or if it's going to be a long day, long play count for the defense.
It's going to be interesting to see. I'm going to try and look up quick. Shame on me for not having this pulled up earlier, but that Purdue game, that 24-7 win in October of 21, right after Iowa was number 2 in the country. They had just beat Penn State. David Bell had 11 catches for 240 yards.
Every play.
There's a reason I didn't remember that. I buried that way, way down. Maybe I was thinking of, I must have been thinking of last year for Maccabee, that he had some big numbers. Or maybe it was against another team that he really started piling up yards. He had 14 for 65 in 2022. But I just remember, just big bruising guy who was finding success as they always do. Just another thing to keep an eye on. Let the Saturday scaries against the Boilermakers sink in. Of course, all you need is just Cooper DeJean to do his thing, maybe return a punt or a interception, and all be well. We've got the footage again. We might as well play it again if we could, Mike, of just that electrifying play. I had completely forgotten this was his first punt return for a touchdown as a Hawkeye, because he's done it so many times with interceptions. He's had so many good punt returns that you're like, yeah, of course. But just an absolute electric play that has led to extended conversations about what his role should be going forward. But of course, Cooper has been doing it all since way back in his high school days as well. I needed to ask him, though, because you sometimes hear as guys play that they have zoned everything else out around the crowds and everything like that. Tough to zone out 70,000 people. So I asked him if he can hear that ambiance, especially, again, the coop was already going before that ball was even snapped on the punt. So I had to know if he had any sort of inkling that people were waiting for something big.
Do you hear the crowd during big plays, like that punt return? I mean, I know you've got the helmet on and there's so much field noise, but can you hear that crescendo of just them getting as hyped up as they do?
Not during the play, but after you definitely can hear it. I think actually as soon as that punt went up, and I think it was where it was on the field, I kind of heard the crowd, starting to get excited a little bit, and then once I caught it, everything kind of just zone out and focus. But then after the play, it was really cool just to hear 70,000 just going crazy. Even on all the turnovers and big plays, our fans are great, and they support us, and we appreciate that. In Kinnick Stadium, I think when you get a packed house, I think it's one of a kind. So.
That's got to be such a wild moment, though, as you don't even have the ball yet, and you can hear the expectation. Yeah. That's got to be trippy.
It's cool, I think, because I think the fans know that there's opportunity out there, so that kind of gives you confidence to go out and do that. So it's cool that they're that locked into the game, that they see what's going to happen.
It was fun for me yesterday. I was just kind of cutting and exporting a lot of my highlights from that game, and so I got to that clip, and I was kind of going through frame by frame of him running down the sideline. And excuse me as I pantomime, this shirt doesn't retain sweat marks very well, so you're going to see me as I raise my arms. But anyway, so you just see as soon as he cuts over to the sideline, you see coaches and players already raising their hand, pointing to the end zone. You see coaches holding each other back, and I mean they knew they could just see it even while he was still on the opposite 40-yard line. Okay, Cooper's going to do something here.
LeVar Woods was feeling great. That's fun seeing the reaction from the security. There was a security guy that was right next to me who was usually and the fans in the background. It's perfectly captures that thrill, and so cool that he can even hear before he fields the ball, the crowd just be it's super cool, which is of course then led to why don't you make the whole plane out of the Cooper DeJean? That discussion of why isn't he playing on offense? Can you do more with him? He was asked about that. Of course, he said, yeah, that'd be super fun. Kirk squashed that pretty quickly.
Kind of. I don't know.
I feel like he did.
I mean,
Cooper DeJean's not going to play offense.
I feel like
He already has, Owen chalked up.
What's that?
He already has played offense, victory formation.
Yes, exactly. He's I've already been in there. I don't know. Both the way that Kirk and Cooper phrase their answers, I'm like, I'm not saying he will, but it's been talked about. I feel like it's definitely been discussed by them, or like they have at least thought about it. I think right now it's not at a place where they even can, because Kirk mentioned pitch count yesterday, where it's like, dude, the defense is playing whatever, like 2/3 of the plays in the game right now, just because the offense can't stay on the field. So it's like he's already out there so much between punt return and, I mean, shoot, how many punt returns do they have? 6, I think, that he had to do. And defense, it's like he's already got so many plays out there, they need him fresh for defense. But if you had a game where offense somehow, I know this is hard to even comprehend, that offense would run more plays than the other team offensively, but it's like, I don't know, I could see them putting him out there. If it's a game that's already in hand, maybe, like, let's let Cooper cook.
So I liked what Matt Vandenberg, Owen had him on Eye on the Hawks, which airs this Thursday at 6:30, former Iowa wide receiver. He said, in his take was, if they do, it's going to be for a small package, maybe five plays in the playbook, and maybe run 1 a game, which would be pretty cool to see if they do that. Again, do they do it? Probably not, but it's still fun to talk about. He's one of those athletes, like, I don't think he's as athletic as Travis Hunter for Colorado, but like, that's amazing to watch when guys are playing both ways.
I feel like both Kirk and Cooper could have totally shut that down, but like, no, it's not being talked about. No, it's not going to happen. But like, they did not. I feel like the door was left open where it's like, oh, there's not really a plan in place right now. And Kirk was like, oh, we've kind of thought about it. And yeah, I don't know. I could see it happening before the season's over.
I do think that's a bit of a long con. I think if he's out there, it's a decoy. Also,
which might benefit the offense
maybe.
too.
And this is also a technically a moment. Caleb Brown is already number 3 on the offense. So I don't think Cooper could go in as a second number 3 on the offense.
You can switch numbers, because that's exactly what Logan Lee does, because he plays on PATs, and so he like subs out and wears like number 96 or something.
So yeah, so that would be the.
How does that work? Does he have like an double X jersey?
Like you hear the PA announcer.
I've heard that, and I'm like, what are they talking about? I didn't know that was why.
Not that that's one thing that could stand in that, like, we can't play him, we have 2 number 3s. Like, I don't think that would be the reason. Aside from every other reason, they probably won't play him on defense. But I do wonder if that's why they don't completely put the kibosh on it, just like, and I mean, they're not fully winking at the camera, but being like, I don't know, maybe you could play.
There's just a little twinkle in Cooper's eye that I'm like, I think, maybe over Wrigley Field or something, if they're up 20 on Purdue or on Northwestern, that maybe, I don't know, I could be talking crazy.
Well, I don't think it would happen, but it'd be, sure be cool if they did. Anyways, speaking of sure be cool, we are less than 2 weeks away from women's basketball at Kinnick Stadium. It was Women's Basketball Media Day. Just a sign of the times that Caitlin Clark had her own separate media availability at the podium, which is super cool. Hawks, #1 team in the Big Ten heading in. She is the preseason player of the year in the conference, as you'd expect. And what were your takeaways from a very early media day? 8 a.m. media days are unheard of, and I don't know how I feel about it. How do you feel about it?
They did have coffee and bagels out for the media to enjoy. Early in the day for us, I had a 6:30 wake up today. Don't love that. And also early, I mean, we've still got over a month until the first regular season game. I think November 6th is the first one, but still 2 weeks out from the, less than 2 weeks out from the crossover at Kinnick. I mean, nobody's going to be surprised at her being the preseason favorite for probably every national award. I have to imagine she's going to be the preseason favorite. But I am very excited about this year's Hawkeye roster, because everybody seems healthy, which is not quite what we had last year, especially with somebody like Kylie Feuerbach, who
sounds like has been great at practice.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa pointed out that she's not wearing a brace on her leg anymore. She's freaking good. Like, Kylie Feuerbach is a really good player. Like, she was great at Iowa State, and she just has not been healthy enough to log any significant minutes at Iowa. And so if she gets on the floor a lot, I think she's going to be outstanding. The biggest hurdle, obviously, is the post with losing Monica Sonano, who's going to replace her. And
nobody really. That's kind of the answer that
Did
we
Lisa
got today.
say this morning, I think I read one of your tweets, that Hannah Stolke's really improved her three-point shooting, because that would be a huge dynamic for this offense if we could run a stretch 5. I know Caitlin said, hey, watch some Draymond Green film, because she's not as tall as some of the bigs in the Big Ten, but if she could stretch the floor like that'd be interesting.
That's what they said. Yeah, they said that she's been working on her threes. I looked it up. She attempted 6 3-pointers last year, made 1 of them. But she made threes in high school. Like I covered a couple of her games when she was still at Wash, and like she was shooting and banking in 3-pointers. I mean, she was a good distance shooter back then. So I could see them doing that. But mainly at that post spot, you've got 3 players who are going to be filling in, and that's Addie O'Grady. I even asked her today. I said, "Do you prefer Addison or Addie?" She said she prefers Addie, so that's what I'm going with. Addie O'Grady, Sharon Goodman, and A.J. Ediger are going to be the 3 players who are kind of going to be stepping into that post spot, filling the shoes left behind. Like, she's a shooter. She holds – so the biggest class in Nebraska is Class A. Mm-hmm. She holds the Class A record for, like, points, 2,300 or something like that, career points, 300 and some odd three-pointers. She set the single-season record for three-pointers in a year as a freshman at Fremont High School, playing under Kelly Flynn, who is a legendary coach in Nebraska, coached at South Sioux City for a long time, and he was great there, and then went over to won a championship at Fremont. But she learned from the best. She was on the All-Iowa attack team, and so she was like, over there they just teach us to, crank up three-pointers all day. And so she'll log some serious minutes this year, and I think she'll make some good shots and maybe not be like a star player this year, but she's somebody to watch down the road that she's going to be a significant part of this team.
Super fun. And, yeah, that exhibition at Kinnick coming up in 11 days, the 15th?
A week from Sunday, I believe.
Yeah, that's true. A week from Sunday. I think 47,000 seats. I think they're pushing for 50. If they can get 50 there, if we get good weather, that's going to be an all-time Kinnick and Iowa athletics moment for sure. Let's recap your Hawkeye top 70 because can we spoil who number 1 is?
I mean, we already aired it, so we're not spoiling much, but...
Caitlin Clark's the number 1 athlete over the last 70 years.
Shocker.
According to Owen and his rankings. Congratulations, by the way, on tackling an endeavor that I believe found its feet in the drive back from Dallas after the championship game. And what an endeavor that is. What is takeaway from a big project like that? And I'm sure you learned a thing or two about the history of Hawkeye athletics.
Yeah, it was, as much as it was a lot of work and a lot of fun to do it, it was great for me just as a sports reporter in this area, I think, to learn some of these names that I didn't know before. Even though I grew up in Iowa, I don't know a lot of these, even some of the big wrestling names from the past. I didn't know much about Ed and Lou Bannock or, TJ and Joe Williams and just some of these incredible wrestling names from the past. So learning about the all-time great wrestlers, learning about the field hockey team who's had so many outstanding players over the years. I mean, honestly, wrestling is Iowa's biggest output historically, but I would say that field hockey might be their second best sport all time, right behind wrestling. I mean, they've had so many Final Fours, they've won a Natty, like so many All-Americans. I mean, just incredible athletes there. So just getting a chance to be more well acquainted with some of the athletes that I didn't know about, and I think maybe a lot of our viewers didn't know about, going back to the 60s and 50s and 70s, that it was just a lot of fun to feature some of these people that we haven't had a chance to talk about in a long time.
All the track and field success they've had, the swimming, the gymnastics, it was just,
incredible men's swimmers over the years, man.
Boy, yeah, those are the eye-popping ones of just you see what they accomplished.
9 national championships for Artur Wodat.
That's right, yeah, that was the one that was like, you can win that many?
What?
Can you do that? There's no limit?
You can argue with the top 5 unless you're saying, and I wouldn't say this, but other people might say, recency bias with Caitlin Clark and Spencer Lee in the top 2, but then Chuck Long at 3, Luka Garza, Cal Jones, round up top 5. Like, I don't know how you argue that.
Yeah,
it's tough to deny Caitlin number 1. I mean, she's transcending the sport, and we said this in Dallas too, changing the way people watch the sport, the amount they consume it. They're having a game at Kinnick Stadium.
One of the things that went into the criteria for number 1, because I mean, from the get-go, I was like, Caitlin's number 1, right? I mean, I tried to do
the Genesis driving to Dallas. I was like, I think we know who's number 1.
And even, the thing to think about when you think about who might be the best of the last 70 years, or even all time, I would say, who is considered somebody that is the GOAT in their sport. Mm-hmm. Spencer Lee, as great as he is, he's a legend as a wrestler. He's not considered the GOAT wrestler. Even Niall Kinnick, as much as he's a legend around here, obviously great Heisman winner, nobody's talking about Niall Kinnick as the greatest football player of all time. Caitlin is being talked about as, even if it's not her, she is one of the best college basketball players of all time. And that to me, had to put her at the top of the list.
And you can watch all of the. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, I was just going to say that, based on that top 5 that I have, anybody that either got left off the list as a whole or out of the top 5 that you would say, oh, I'd like to have seen them in there, or omissions.
Just for my personal, and then we talked about this, and I agree with you, but I'm just bringing it up for conversation's sake. Like when I was younger, Brad Banks was the world to me. Like he He's the reason I'm such a big Hawkeye fan today, and he was such electric. But the fact that he only played one true season, I know he played a little bit in 2001, split time with Kyle McCann. You can't put him that high, unless he won the Heisman that year, which
that's a different set. That's also a different set of rankings, maybe like greatest season in Hawkeye history, and so that's your next.
He was still pretty high. I mean, he was top 15.
Yeah.
And that just speaks to how great he was
that
in
one season. I mean,
for sure.
Because I was the same way. That was the first season that I really followed college football. Was 2002, and man, Brad Banks was such an incredible player that year. Yeah, one more season that's even like above average, and he would maybe be top 5, if not top 10.
You can watch all of that coverage from way, way back at Iowa's News Now, CBS2Iowa.com, and you did the opening ones were in chunks of 5, and then those final top 5 are all their own individual ones. And I've told you this already, just fantastic stuff. Just super, super cool to get all those history lessons and all the archive stuff. That's the fun stuff for us. I know we both are fun. Both really enjoyed digging through everything.
One thing I'm hoping to put it on the website as well. Curtis actually gave me this idea to have all 70 be on one timeline, so that people could go and just watch it in one place. So it'd be like a 30-minute video or something at least, but have it at least on the website so somebody can go and not have to dig back to June where we did our first one. So
that'd be super cool to be able to do, and hopefully get that on the Iowa's News Now YouTube page as well, where you can watch all of our Eye on the Hawks content as well. Let's get to the picks. Nobody's doing particularly well this year. By nobody, I mean me. Here's what we're going to go through. As you see there, let's just go to a vote. There's no spread because Howard's an FCS team. They're at Northwestern. Raise your hand if you think Northwestern wins that game.
I think we're good.
Can't see my hand.
All opposed. Motion passes. Northwestern over Howard. So that's why we've got our first Big Ten East game in here that we'll get to in a little bit. Let's start with the team that lost to Purdue last week. Illinois hosting Nebraska. Their 3.5-point favorite. Welcoming the Cornhuskers into Champaign. Your thoughts, Owen?
That is a tricky game, but Illinois, we've talked about it. It seems like every week that they've been a little bit of a disappointment this year. This is tough. I'm almost surprised that they're a favorite. It could almost be a pick 'em for me, but I think I like Illinois. Just being the home team, I think that's what's going to get me on Illinois' side.
I think they're favorites because Nebraska just got pounded by Michigan last week. I'm going to go Nebraska. I'm going to finally take my advice and not trust Illinois. Nebraska's defense, although they gave up 35 against Michigan, who's a really good team, is a lot better than last year. So I think, and Illinois gave up 6 sacks last week. I think that's going to come into play this week. So I'm going to take the Cornhuskers.
I'm going to do the same. Cornhuskers and Nebraska plus 3.5. Even I think they can keep it within a field goal. I think they've got the offense figured out a little bit, even if it wasn't evident against Michigan. I don't think a lot of stuff can be evident against Michigan. They're just such a great program. But encouraged by Nebraska, and again, Illinois just can't protect the ball. I really like Luke Altmaier, but as Kaysen can attest to, he just throws way too many interceptions for anybody's liking, so I will take the Cornhuskers to cover in Champaign. Maryland, a 20-point dog at 5-0, heading to Ohio State. I'm going to start here. I'm very high on the Terps. I will take them to cover at Ohio State. That offense is super, super fun. Ohio State is not the dominant power that they have in the past. That win against Notre Dame looks better and better every week, even though it's only been a couple weeks. I think that'll still be a crown jewel by the time we wrap up the regular season. But Maryland is really good. I'm not saying they're going to outright win in Columbus in the Horseshoe, but that's appointment television for me on Saturday. That's going to be a fun one to watch.
There are folks getting high on Tonga Vailoa as a Heisman candidate.
His numbers are
nuts. His dude's been insane this year.
Great.
How much of an injustice is it? Maryland's not ranked right now?
It's weird.
They're 5-0 and not ranked.
LSU's ranked with 2 losses. SEC. Come on. Like the AP voters, they got it wrong this week. I'll just say that.
Then Kirby Smart says he thinks every SEC team should be ranked or something like that.
It's not a good. Obviously the top of the league, Alabama and Georgia. Alabama's even a little down for their standards, but Georgia hasn't played up to their potential either, but I just don't see how you put a 2-loss. I know they lost to Florida State, and they've lost to, I'm blanking on the other team. It was a good team, but come on.
Yeah. When a team's gotten
Ole Miss, they lost Ole Miss last week.
When a team's gotten to 5-0, especially beating 3 Power 5 wins against Virginia, Michigan State, and Indiana, there's no reason that Maryland shouldn't be in the I get it, but come on, they deserve to at least get the recognition of a top 25. Long story short, I'm going to take Maryland too. I think that they could keep within 20. maybe give Ohio State a test. Maybe, again, this is a week where we get to see what Maryland's really made of.
I'm going the Terps too. I don't think they win, but 20 is a lot, especially for. I think the reason it's so high is Maryland's played. Generally, I know 3 Power 5 teams, but they're not the strongest schedule in college football. Indiana, but Indiana, it's covered a 20-point spread against Ohio State, so that's why I'm picking the Terps.
Yeah, just a puzzling spread there, which means Ohio State probably wins by 35. Rutgers, a 13-point dog, heading to Wisconsin, who the Hawkeyes will have next week. Scarlet Knights, I've said it before, I like this team quite a bit, but Wisconsin, even losing a tailback, still seeming to finding their feet with that new offense under Luke Fickell. Mike, what do you think about that matchup in Madison?
Rutgers kind of reminds me of Maryland with the schedule. I know they did play Michigan, and then they, got beat pretty bad. It was close for a little bit. I think Wisconsin turned a corner a little bit. I'm going to take them at home. I don't trust Rutgers on the road, even to cover that spread. I don't think their offense is that great.
Yeah, I think I like Wisconsin in that one too to cover, just getting home field advantage. Yeah.
Maluzzi out for Wisconsin is tough. Braylon Allen's still super, super good. He'll step in, but Maluzzi is going to be a loss. I said I like this Rutgers team. I think they can lose by 10. I don't think they go in and win, but I think Wimsatt and that offense can do enough to keep Wisconsin's offense off the field, and so I'm going to take Rutgers to cover there. Again, we've talked about Northwestern. Everybody thinks they'll beat Howard, so there you go. Michigan heads to Minnesota for the Battle of the Little Brown Jug, a rivalry that doesn't get enough respect, I feel like, nowadays, mostly because it hasn't been a rivalry for the most part of the last 25 years. But Minnesota, a 19-point home dog against the Wolverines. Owen, your thoughts?
Well, Minnesota certainly has left a lot to be desired out there, unless you're looking at their helmets. When they put,
Goldie?
What's it? Was
Is
it
it Goldie?
Goldie, yeah. With
In the old school sweater and everything?
His face on the side of the helmet. I'm not mad about that at all. 19 is a big old number again. It feels like one of these weeks Minnesota's talented enough that they could surprise a good team and give them a good test, and that could be this week. I'll take Minnesota to beat that spread.
I'm going Michigan here. I just think they're too strong. They're obviously a playoff contender, and they could, contend for a national title this year. And Minnesota's left a lot to be desired this year, so I think the Wolverines go in and cover.
I'm going to take Minnesota to cover just because even losing Darius Taylor, who we still don't really know exactly the extent of his injury, but they plugged in Zach Evans, who was a recruit they were really excited about, who was banged up for a while. He had a great game against Louisiana. Sean Tyler got some carries again. Bryce Williams. That offensive line, I mean, you can plug a lot of dudes back there, and they're going to move the ball. Minnesota's pass defense, I think, could be a key in keeping this within the spread. Tyler Nubin's as good as he gets in the Big Ten. So, I don't know if Minnesota can win this game, but I certainly think they can keep it within the 19. And that brings us to Iowa's homecoming game against Purdue. The Hawkeyes, still 2.5-point favorites despite losing Cade McNamara, despite not having Luke Lachey. We saw Caleb Williams. He's at Southern California. Caleb Johnson, though, is still a running back for Iowa. He was back at practice today, and it sounds like he was there yesterday as well. Jazz Patterson will not be out there for the Hawkeyes. Sounds like Caleb maybe has an opportunity to play, but that's got Iowa as a 2.5-point favorite at home against the Boilermakers. Michael, what do you say?
I've been going back and forth. We touched on a little bit. I'm always uneasy when Iowa plays Purdue. We've seen upsets, we've seen close games, we've seen shootouts. But I just don't think this Purdue team is as talented as Iowa, especially, when our offense plays against our defense, plays against their offense. I think that's going to be the difference. And, it's not a night game, but it is going to be an awesome atmosphere. And I expect a few false starts. We've seen that couple games this year. And, if it was maybe 4 or 5 points, I'd pick Purdue, but I'm going to pick the Hawkeyes to cover.
I feel like maybe I've let this unnamed sports writer get into my head a little bit because he had really zero confidence in Iowa this week, and so I think I'm going to take Purdue. That it could be a really close one that gets decided by a field goal or something. So I think it could be a toss-up on who wins this game. Maybe, I'd love to see Deacon go out there and show out, but, maybe that doesn't happen. So, anyway, I'll stick with Purdue to keep it close.
Purdue gets in everybody's. I mean, it's Purdue. We've seen it time and again. They know how to move it against the Hawkeyes.
As I pointed out to you guys yesterday, 93rd all-time meeting between Iowa and Purdue, the third longest rivalry, third most games, I guess, among any team that Iowa plays. Minnesota's number 1, Wisconsin is number 2, and then Purdue's number 3. Wisconsin's only played Iowa, I think, 95 times, and Purdue's not far behind with 93. Wow. Found that interesting. Okay, go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, you'd think Wisconsin and Iowa would have tangled a few more times than that. I'm going to take Iowa to cover. I think this could be a 3-point win, so thanks for the half-point Vegas. I think we'll see ups and downs from Deacon. I do think the ups will be this was a popular question at media availability yesterday of just, or I guess a popular answer and observation from players that every once in a while he'll make a throw where the players just go, whew. And I think he'll have a throw or two like that on Saturday. I think the defense has more opportunities again to maybe pump up those turnover numbers a little bit. Again, Hudson Card, not a guy who turns the ball over a lot, but these things tend to come in bunches. Sometimes you get 3 against Michigan State, maybe you get another 2 against Purdue. So I will take the Hawkeyes to cover and win and move to 5-1, 1-0 in the Deacon Hill era. Final thoughts before we sign off here, anybody?
Where do you think we go when we die? Where
next on Eye on the Hawks?
No, as I've said, I think earlier this week, this is the game where I do think we see what Iowa is made of. Where I think that they're a team that matches up well with Purdue, that is again another talented team, and so this is the game where the rubber meets the road, and we see what Iowa's made of.
I feel like I'm excited to see Deacon start, and I think it's been like such a weird week when we're on the field and Cade goes down. I'm like, well, that's it. I was one of those guys where I'm like, well, this isn't going to be a good season. And then, you watch the game, you rewatch the game, you look at some of his throws, and you're like, well, it's not that much different than what it was with Cade. And I think Cade's obviously a better quarterback, but he wasn't healthy. So, I'm excited to see what the offense does game plan wise, because you saw it last week where they came out and just started throwing to receivers and started targeting them more. Like, hopefully they keep doing that, even with, and I said this on Sunday, but even with Deacon as a starter, hopefully the game plan doesn't change. I know they'll probably want to get Caleb back in the mix if he plays, but I think I'm looking at it as an optimist. Like, let's see what we got.
Anticipate a strong first drive, because we've gotten that about every week so far.
Yeah, and the wide receiver targets were way up, and I can't help but look at Deacon Hill and see shades of Nate Stanley. I know it's just probably the body set up, but the kid can sling it, and you see the excitement in the team's eyes. So why not be a little more excited for what could become their optimism? That's what we're doing here on Eye on the Hawks. We'll be back here Sunday at noon live to break everything down against the Boilermakers and Hawkeyes. So from Mike and Owen, I'm Mitch. We'll see you Sunday at noon on Eye on the Hawks.